set my soul on fire. Thinking back before I left, the passions I desire. Can you help me anymore? Live my life more.
Hello, and welcome back to Roads and Roads, the Jorma and John podcast. Glad to have you here with us for episode 3. And today we are going to be talking about Jorma's new record, which contains some old Jorma material. And I'm talking about the new 23-song record known as Reno Road. And I want to show you this beautiful piece here. Great album artwork by our friend Kevin Morgan, who does so much great work for us. Beautiful. I love seeing the young Jorma picture on the inside. Look at that, the tape box on the outside. This done by Culture Factory, who we've been working with, and once again, they've done a fantastic job presenting this 2 LP set, and great inner sleeve photos, liner notes, and very cool. Gold vinyl, because they did go to the mine to get the material for this great release.
What weight is that vinyl?
Let me tell you, I'm thinking maybe 179 grams. They said 180. This one here feels a little light. What do you think? See what you think.
Maybe 179.
179. It's real close, though. It's close to that 180. Anyhow, fantastic new release. And even though we love vinyl, this is also available on CD, and the company has done, again, a beautiful job on this.
What color is the CD?
Yeah, the CDs, they do the mini LPs.
Oh, look at this.
And look at this gold CD. The music is golden. Anyhow, this is a great new release from Jorma, a great new release of old material, and we're going to talk about all this stuff, but one thing that comes to my mind instantly is that there are these 23 songs on this record. 17 songs are still songs that I hear you do regularly. Some, of course, you do more regular than others, but are still part of your repertoire. And boy, when I listened to it the first time, I felt like a privilege, like I was going back to some field recordings. I thought maybe Alan Lomax had been over my house and dropped off some tapes to listen to.
Right deep in the fields of Chevy Chase, D.C.
Yes. But, I think of the record and I thought, this is like the roots of Jorma Kaukonen.
It is.
This is like the what you were doing then. And, well, there's so much to talk about, Jorma, with the record here, but the record came out on Record Store Day, Black Friday, so it recent release this end of last year. And Jorma, maybe before we jump into talking about the record, and before I go any further, I'd like to say thank you, Jack Cassidy. It was awfully nice that he had the vision to record you on this particular day you dropped by. Now, Jorma, I was wondering, was this something like when you talked to Jack, you said, I got these songs I want you to record, or you just dropped by his house and he decided to record it?
Well, back in those days, not everybody had a tape recorder, but Jack, being Jack, of course, had one. And the one that he had was a Walla, and the Walla was an interesting beast because stereo was like a completely new concept, or moderately completely new concept back in those days. And the Walla, if you wanted to record in stereo, you needed to have the second hand. It just looked like the mothership, but that did the other track. I don't know how it worked because I never had one, but it took those 2 parts. Anyway, Jack didn't have the 2 parts to my knowledge. But as a result, if you just had the mothership side of it, it did two stereo tracks in each direction. So it was actually a 4-track machine. So if recording mono, instead of just being able to record one way and then flip it over and record the other way, you now had twice as many tracks. Anyway, it was a big deal back then.
Cutting edge.
Cutting edge.
For sure.
Yeah, so he had the Walla, and it's just like, I don't know what was running through his mind if we had him here, or if he was recording a bunch of other stuff. The answer is I really don't know, but I stopped by his house and started talking about what I'd been doing, and he said, why don't you show me? And
And you got a microphone, like just a table mic, or
that's a mic. Yeah. Probably didn't even have a mic stand. Probably was a table mic.
And I kind of got the impression, were these just like first takes all the way through?
Oh gosh, so it's I hate to bet the farm on it, but I'm sure it was just one take stuff. Yeah.
And I didn't know if when you put the record together, if you just went in the order of the box, but the sequencing is very very perfect.
That's the way we did it.
Yeah, that was great from the start there. Yeah. So how great that Jack did that on that time. Now listen, before we start talking about Reno Road and going down that street.
Correct.
Let's go back a little bit and talk about Antioch in 1960.
Sure.
And Ian Buchanan, because I know Ian is a big influence on you, and as far as him teaching you these songs, turning tantrum, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Ian was more than an influence. It's thanks to him that basically I learned how to play this kind of music. He was certainly my gateway drug to that kind of stuff. And Ian was a really interesting guy. He was probably a little older than me, not much, but he was light years ahead in terms of his musical environment, his musical universe, and he and the Reverend were friends. And Ian was one of these guys. When I started to play, quote unquote, this kind of music, fingerstyle blues or gospel or whatever you want to call what it is that guys like me do, I doubt there was 100 guys in the entire country that did that kind of stuff. Probably pushing it to say there was 50.
Right.
Many of whom at that time lived in Berkeley or New York City, but and other places too, I'm sure. But in any case, it wasn't the enveloping, art form that it is today. All kinds of people are extremely good fingerstyle guitar players, and back in those days, it just wasn't how it was. But anyway, so I had been Antioch had this work-study program, where depending on what semester system that you were on, you might, like when I went there, I went through an academic semester or quarter or whatever they had back in those. I think it's quarters actually, and then I worked in D.C. At an office in the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare for 3 months, and then I went back to Antioch, and that's where I met Ian, and that would have probably been because I was the winter quarter. I was working at the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, Division of Air Pollution, where I was I forget exactly what they called me, some civil service thing, junior grade, I forget anyway, but I actually had to pass a test and stuff.
Ooh.
That gave me the brief experience of working in an office, which made me want to never do it again. But anyway, so I came back to Antioch, and I was in an off-campus house, and there was a bunch of players there. The roommate that was assigned to me was this guy Steve Richmond. He lives in Hawaii now. Who was a 5-string banjo player, and Ian was there. There was another guy named Alan Heald, and some other people whose names I don't remember. But everybody played something. Did they plan that way? I doubt it. It's just how it was in Antioch.
The student housing, Jorma, or
well, it was run by the college,
okay.
But it was an off-campus dorm.
Not like a dorm. It was more like.
Well, it was a dorm.
Okay.
But it was a house.
All right.
We live in Athens, Ohio, so we know what that's like, and it was just as messy and crudted up as the student housing is here in Athens. But anyway, so yeah, I remember like this place. A number of us there had motorcycles from one time to another, and they were frequently in the kitchen being taken apart and putting back together again. Wow. Anyway, that had nothing to do with the music, but yeah. So I guess I've been playing the guitar, and at the time I had sold my J45 foolishly when I was at the office on that co-op job. I don't know why I sold it, but I did. And this friend of mine, who I'd gone to high school with, lent me a Harmony Sovereign that he had. And I remember just sitting around just thrashing away on this thing, whatever.
You flat picking at these things?
Yeah, I started out flat picking, yeah. And I don't remember exactly how this happened. And I'm guessing, but I thought on some level Ian probably just couldn't stand to hear me do that anymore. Or maybe he felt that there was promise.
I bet there's
who
promise.
knows, you know. But he wound up taking me under his wing, and he started to show me these songs. Now, the first one that I learned was a sort of a baby steps version of Blind Blake's West Coast Blues. But as you know, the trick with that kind of stuff is the quarter note alternating thumb. There's more to it once you get into it, but that's the gateway. That's the gateway drug to that kind of stuff. And I remember we could geek out on this for a while, but maybe we will. Who knows? But I remember when I first started to get the thumb thing. Oh, the other thing too is teachers like Ian back in those days. Like today, I might, if I'm teaching somebody, I might write out a chord chart or maybe count out a measurement. Nobody did that back in those days. I mean, like Ian would show me something, I'd scurry off into a corner and start picking. And I'd come back and I'd go, check this out. And he'd go, you suck. I told you it goes like this. And I got it. Scurry back and do it again. So, and I just started messing, like I said, we can mess around on this subcutaneous learning how to play the guitar stuff, but I just stuck with it, and after a while I started to get it.
So that's what I was wondering. So it was kind of just organically come together. You're in the house together. Now, did you hear him playing and something?
Oh, absolutely.
You heard him playing and go, wow, this fingerstyle.
Oh, absolutely, totally, absolutely. You know,
you got bit by it.
You know, Ian was like light years ahead. I mean, he was one of the contenders. He was one of the best players in New York City at that time of the white guys.
Was he a student of the Revs?
You know, it's something we never discussed, but my impression was he learned a bunch of stuff from the Reverend, but they were friends. Mm-hmm. I don't think he was a student in the way that maybe David Bromberg was, or Stefan Grossman when he was a kid, stuff like that. I think they were friends, because Ian's muse was Lonnie Johnson.
Okay.
And Lonnie Johnson was had more of a jazz kind of thing than what the Reverend did.
Heavyweight guitar player.
Totally. Oh gosh, and Ian could do that kind of stuff too.
Wow. So he was very, very talented player.
Totally. Well, he was, like I said, he was a contender. And I remember when I met him at Andie, I had no idea about what the scene was in New York, and I didn't realize that he was one of the revered guys in the scene at that time.
Mm-hmm. I remember you showed me a picture of him years ago, and I saw him, and he looked like a real hip cat. I mean, I think he had a beret on, right? And
well, I don't remember that picture, but the picture I remember is when I have my mantle at home right now, where he's kind of got he was sort of sandy blonde hair. He's got a fair to middling pompadour, you know, like the way we used to comb our hair back in those days.
Very cool. So the material, Jorma, that Ian is showing you, and indeed that shows up on our record here.
Right.
Were there certain songs that you were attracted to? Did you ask him to play, or you hear him play something and you said, I want to learn this, or did he just kind of give you his body of work and that's what you
So, I wouldn't want to bet the farm exactly how this evolved, but I would imagine that I heard him play something and I said I needed to go there. And again, you know, we never, you know, like, you know, you and I are kind of in the teaching business these days also, and it's just, I was talking to some of the guys in this class we just had recently about that, you know, the way we break things down, or somebody that wants to learn something, et cetera, blah, blah. I mean, it really wasn't like that. Everything was completely anecdotal. Mm-hmm. You know, it was just kind of like a peer-to-peer sharing, back when you didn't need like a computer to do that kind of stuff.
Right. Was he good at it? If you had to see something, let me see you do that over and over again?
No.
No.
He just showed it to me, and
you had to.
And I had to do it, and if he didn't like it, he'd tell me I sucked.
And come back.
That's right.
And come back and try again. And you ever, at this point in your life, when you start this fingerstyle, did you just start playing guitar like crazy and practicing?
Yeah.
I know, you know, it takes a lot of work to do
Yeah,
that.
it does. I mean, I don't think I ever can. The answer is I spent a lot of time on it. And I'm surmising, I'm opining after all these years that one of the reasons that I didn't get kicked out of Antioch, but they didn't encourage me to come back after the next work quarter. And I suspect that might have had something to do with the mediocrity of my grades. You know, You know, to me back in those days, you know, Vanessa and I have a daughter who's really smart, and she gets these, her report card is like, holy mackerel, you know? To me, a C plus was a symbol of glowing success.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way growing up. My brother, he could get A's without studying. I had to study hard to get like a C.
I hear you, my brother.
It's the beginning of the blues, you are.
That's totally the blues. But yeah, so, yeah, and all I did, I mean, in reality, of course, what I was doing was practicing, but I didn't think about it like that, because to me, the word practice would have
Too scholastic.
evoked some incredibly boring and difficult piano exercise.
Okay. Now, you know, when you're learning these songs, was Ian the type to say, Jorma, I'm going to show you this Blind Blake song, or I'm going to show you a few Reverend Gary Davis songs? And then I guess along the same question, Jorma, were you guys sitting there maybe putting on a record and listening to it and him saying, this is how this song goes? No,
I didn't. I wound up, first of all, I'd never heard of Reverend Gary Davis before. And so I got my first Reverend record later, probably towards the end of that summer that we're digging into right now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, everything was just so anecdotal. I mean, I just listening to him play. I'm sure I asked him to play something, you know, more than one time, et cetera, but I don't think that it wasn't really teaching in the way that we do today, because it was a lifestyle. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. It was just a lifestyle for a 19-year-old.
Yeah. Now these songs, Jorma, were recorded so far before your time. I mean, you know, Blind Lemon Jefferson, 1926, and a lot of stuff in the 20s and 30s. What, being like a 19-year-old guy, would attract you to this old music when you heard it? Was there something there that just grabbed you?
I think this is a question that comes up a lot when one has this kind of a conversation, and the answer, I think, is it was the truth. It was songs about real life, you know. Of course, you know, it seemed that, of course, there was a lot of drinking and chasing women, which seemed like an appealing thing to me at the time, I think. And
it goes all together.
And you didn't, you know, the lyrics of the popular songs of that time wouldn't have even everything would have been veiled under layers of
that wasn't
obscurity.
You weren't going in that direction.
No, and the music is cool too. I mean, just the whole thing about it. I mean, it's a good question. Why? It was just cool, and it was mostly guitar music. Now, Jack's older brother, Chick, was really responsible in a lot of ways for most of us guys in the neighborhood, because most of the girls back then weren't really interested in this kind of music yet. He just turned us on to a lot of stuff, like the classic Muddy Waters record on Chess, the Howling Wolf, all those records from that same era, Muddy Waters, the Two Little Walter, well, there's only one Little Walter record when that came out, the Wolf stuff, all that stuff that we all had in our record collection back then. After a while, you know, Chick turned me on to that kind of stuff. So, and we loved it, of course, you know, the groove, the beats, the licks, all that stuff was just incredibly cool. But even though I had an electric guitar when I was a senior in high school, and Jack and I had our little band, we were not a blues band, and I'd never seen anybody do that stuff. I don't think I ever played a blues lick on an electric guitar then, or even on an acoustic guitar at that time. So my whole thing was, aside from the fact that I loved the electric blues, you know. Yeah, for example, you know, Andie College had open dorms back then, and I remember the John Lee Hooker record that was out at that time. If you had a hot date, that was a good record to put on in your dorm room, you know.
Okay. Wasn't that one Burnin' and Luton?
No. Anyhow, yeah, it's just really seductive kind of stuff.
Jorma, as far as Ian, was he around, and did you guys keep in touch? Did he get to see your rise as far as a guitar player and in the style that he taught you?
So, sort of. The simple answer is sort of. So after that one summer in New York, well, the spring quarter in Antioch with the end, and then I had a co-op job in New York. I was working there at a hospital, doing a bunch of orderly kind of stuff that I hope I'll never have to do again. But anyway, yeah, so I hung out with Ian and his friend Marty Brennan, who's still alive, and this gal named Linda Fuchs. Marty and Linda and I had a little sort of an old-timey band and played in country bars, and all the time I was working on the fingerstyle stuff. So in that 6-month period, the quarter at Antioch when Ian marinated me and all that stuff, and then the 3, whatever it was, months in New York City, that pretty much defined what I've been for the rest of my life. So anyway, so when I left New York in that fall, and I stopped by to see Jack when this recording that we're talking about happened, and then I went to I didn't see Ian again until the airplane just got started, and we were doing one of our first tours in New York, and I don't even think Grace was in the band yet, because we were staying at the Albert Hotel. I remember, it's funny kind of stuff. All of a sudden we're in a band, you get a job in another city, which was a big deal back in those days.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, we played at Cafe A Go-Go in New York for 2 weeks, and we stayed at the Albert Hotel. Why? Because the Butterfield Blues Band stayed there. I mean, I remember Bloomfield told me, "You got to stay at the Albert." Let me put it this way: it was not the Ritz.
Okay.
So that was pretty much Ian came by, and we hung out a little bit, and that
Did you see him draw satisfaction seeing how it happened?
I'm not sure. We didn't really talk about it. I think we probably smoked some pot, which was kind of like a new thing to guys like us back in those days. But anyhow, so we hung out. I guess, and I never saw him again. And then I remember, I guess it was in the late 70s. I'd have to look this up. I should know it. It was the early 80s, I'm saying, but maybe late 70s. I was thinking about, I should get in touch with Ian again, see what's going on. And right around that time, I actually got a phone call in San Francisco. A friend of mine told me that Ian had committed suicide.
Oh, boy. When you do these songs, you remember, and we see this at the ranch too, through the years, some people will take a song and they want to do it just like the record.
Right.
And was that an emphasis as far as what he was imparting to you, or was it a little more free flow, like his interpretation?
No, it was pretty much free flow. I don't remember him ever saying, "Well, Blind Joe Flatfoot didn't do it this way."
Yeah, and you wouldn't be putting on a record and saying, "Listen to how this was done," or something.
Oh, we might be doing that, just to try to extract some kind of not only context, but a cool lick or something like that. But he never put any pressure on me to play like anybody. And, that stood me in good stead over the years, because I remember also when I was in New York in that summer of 1960, that, I was just like a hick kid from the suburbs of D.C. New York is always New York. There's a lot of, for lack of a better way to put it, a lot of swing and dick kind of stuff going on. And you know what I mean. And
yes, you put it just the way.
Yeah, I know. It's really the only way to put it.
I know just what you mean.
I know you do. And I got some criticism back in those days from the elders, not from Dave Ronk specifically, but from some of his contemporaries and pals that, well, so-and-so didn't do it like this. And I remember, I just didn't have the talent to do that. And the good news is that it stood me in good stead over the years. I do have one Dave Van Ronk story, and Ian, which...
Please tell.
I'm going to tell it because it's the only one I've got that's like that. So I'm hanging around, and get off work at the hospital, go... Ian had inherited a house in in Forest Hills. So here's this blues playing guy that's got a house in Forest Hills. Anyway, so he goes, he never used my first name. He goes, "Hey, Kaukonen, we're going to play poker at Van Ronk's tonight. Do you want to go?" And I went, "Absolutely." He says, "You got to sit in the corner and don't say a word." So I did, and it was great.
It was okay.
Yeah.
Wow. They didn't deal you in on the game?
No, I was, like I said, I was a complete non-entity. You know, it's really funny because who knows how people see any of us, you know. So the Dylan movie came out. We went to see it together, as I
Loved
recall.
it. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it too. That's a conversation for another time, probably, but I really
There you
enjoyed
go.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think I bought Bob a beer at Gertie's Folk City or something like that. Hard to remember. But, you know, because you were back there in that time, people think, well, you must have been hanging out with Bob and Joan and all these people. I was like, no, it wasn't like that. I couldn't even been granted an audience. I was a complete non-entity. It was worth a free beer, but aside from that.
All right. You know, I want to ask another question before we
Sure.
delve into these songs here. You know, we talk about acoustic blues and stuff, but you're listening to music as well.
Sure.
And by this time, late 50s, already Buddy's headed to Chicago and going electric. You know,
Yeah.
that record you talk about, the folk singer, which we love, where the acoustic record and stuff. But you got Muddy's going electric, Wolf's out there, Sonny Boy's got electric band, all that.
I think that Muddy Electric record was before the acoustic one.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
He went back to do that.
Yeah, I think he did.
Could
when
be,
the folk thing started happening, that's when he went
That's when
back
he
and
did
did that
that.
acoustic
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
I mean, he those guys just wrote the book on that electric blues thing.
What say kept you with the acoustic guitar instead of listening? What tweaked you that and didn't hearing the electric guitar and going to that at that point?
I honestly, I had no interest in it whatsoever. I mean, I had nobody. I just didn't. I
You
didn't.
obviously would hear Muddy and all that stuff.
Oh, of course, and we loved it.
And
Don't get me wrong, love the music, but as far as a player, that just didn't beckon to me at that time. I think I really liked the fact also that being a fingerstyle blues player, you could do it by yourself. I've never been much of a joiner, and so I would have had to have a bunch of like-minded spirits. And also, I didn't come up in that environment. I mean, think about, you know, we've read all these stories about Bloomfield and Naftal and all these guys and hanging out with the boys in Chicago. I was from Chevy Chase, D.C. There were no boys from Chicago and Chevy Chase.
You had a different experience.
Yeah, total different experience, yeah.
All right, well, I'll tell you what do you think about, we'll pull over and head down Reno Road and talk about the new record.
I think that's a great idea.
And to kind of get in the flavor, if you don't mind, let's see.
Fire it up.
Let's see what's playing in Radio Dream Streamland
Indeed.
today and see if it's one. Oh, I like this one.
Troubling mind, I'm blue. I won't be blue always, for the sun gonna shine in my backyard someday, my backyard someday. My baby's gone.
I hate to turn it down. I love that song so much.
We can come back and listen to it again.
Okay, yeah, we'll listen to it. You know, there you go. That is the first song on Reno Road. And as I was talking to you, Jorma, about my impressions of the record when I first heard it, with that starting right there, as soon as I heard it, I said, that's Jorma Kaukonen's guitar. That is the Jorma Kaukonen guitar sound. Your vocals is of a younger man. But I still hear Jorma there, and really when I do listen to these 23 songs, Jorma, in a lot of cases, especially the intros right away, like I'll talk about True Religion, also another one.
Yeah.
When I hear it, it is not like, it's almost like the 65 years later. We got this. You could do the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, these songs have evolved when. That I
Sure.
think is so much what I love about the record when I talk to you about field recording and and the roots of Jorma Kaukonen, but it isn't like you hear it and go, wow, he sure came a long way. You have come a long way. I don't mean that in that way, but I mean those
Right.
songs already had like a real the fundamental and crucial stuff was already there.
Right. Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, my identity was certainly pretty solid even in that time. And when when Vanessa and I got to listen to these tapes before we did the record and all that stuff, and Jack had sent them out, we're listening to them, and without blowing smoke at myself, one of the things I said is, man, I was pretty good for a kid that hadn't been playing for
I'll
4 months,
When you said how long you had been playing, I almost found it unbelievable that you could be that good, especially in fingerstyle guitar playing in that short a time.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely meant to be for me, and and like I said, it really forged my musical identity in a lot of ways. I mean, that's all I really cared about. I mean, we're having a conversation here, and you come up with all these interesting questions, and it's fun you make me think about some of this stuff. I really could have cared less about me playing an electric guitar back in those days. I had to be convinced to play with the Jefferson Airplane. I mean, don't get me wrong. I loved it. I loved the sounds. I loved all that kind of stuff. But just for myself, I just really didn't care about it.
Right. Yeah, that is a real interesting thing to think
It
about.
is.
That the electric.
But as a result, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that the electric phase in. Yeah.
But as a result, because I had such focus on what I was doing, that it really allows me to forge an artistic identity at a very young part of my life. Now, I've been around for a couple 24 hours, so you look at the stuff that the kids of all ages do today. You learn things from YouTube, you learn things. And listen, I'm not critical of any of this stuff. It's not 1960 anymore,
No, it isn't, Jorma.
But, for me, just because of the way the scattershot way my mind works sometimes, it was a blessing that I didn't have all those things to think about. I just really focused on what I was interested in. And after this, when I just stopped by to see Jack and we did the Reno, the now soon-to-be legendary Reno Road recordings.
Yes, indeed.
And I went to the Philippines. I had the stuff that I knew, and I had 2 records with me. Reverend Davis, Harlem Street Singer, the original green cover.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was Prestige Bluesville, as I recall.
Yes, it was, Jorma.
And the record that the Reverend shared with Pink Anderson, I think it was just called Reverend Gary Davis and Pink, I forget, but it was on Riverside.
Yep.
I only had those 2 records. And I didn't even listen to the Pink Anderson side. All I listened to for the next year or so was...
The rep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was another record that I had back then, too, and I'm trying to think. I don't remember whether I don't even think I took this one with me, but there's a 10-inch Folkways LP of Brownie McGee, because I used to do a bunch of Brownie songs, which, sad to say, I let go a lifetime ago, because Brownie was awesome. A lot of guys, especially guys my age, think about Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, because they were a duo for many years. And in an accompanying context, which Brownie did, backing Sonny, he did what he was supposed to do, which is to play a lot of rhythm and connective tissue and stuff like that. But he was a monstrous guitar player also, and you could hear that on that Folkways 10-inch.
Mm-hmm. That Trouble in Mind, Jorma, it kind of became like a blues standard in some ways. And when you were playing it in the early days, were other people playing it? Was it already known, kind of like one of those blues songs?
Because my actual world was so small, I can't really weigh in on that. I mean, Ian, I learned it from Ian, so it was obviously part of his repertoire, and I'm sure others. I think Walter Davis recorded the first version of that song, and I think it was he was a piano player. It's just that song is one of these songs that just has extremely long legs,
Yes.
And it's not. I guess looking back at it, because we know so much more about stuff like that today, it was not a completely typical blues song of that time. had that little circle of fifths thing, and it was just kind of cool. It's just a great song.
It is a great song.
You know, and over the years, as you know, many people from many different musical genres have recorded that song.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was looking it up, Nina Simone had a charted 11th position on Billboard charts in 1961 with that song.
Oh, Nina, wow.
Yeah, but indeed, like you say, a lot of people touched on that song.
Yeah.
And okay, so next up we go to True Religion. And,
True Religion.
And again, that's one of the songs that as soon as I heard it playing, it's like, it's Jorma. It isn't like as if you, on this here, I mean,
Right.
you know, we're sitting here 65 years later, Jorma,
Yeah.
from when this record was,
It's crazy.
from when these tapes were made. And, you know, I've been privileged to get to hear you many, many times over the decades, and you do these songs consistently.
Yeah.
Always adding something to it.
Right.
I tend to think sometimes the last time I hear you play is the best time I ever heard it, because that's how it is.
Yeah.
But the songs are so strong on their own. It isn't like you would listen to this record and go, oh, I could tell he
Right.
was just getting started. And you embellish things a lot more. You've added a lot of little
Right.
things but the songs being there. But the True Religion really that is on here is, you know, it's pretty.
You know, to
true.
be honest with you, sometimes the embellishments add to the song, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, every now and then I go, man, I gotta bring it back to earth again, you know. But,
Yeah, that's a good point, Jorma, because on that True Religion, I felt that it's like bringing it back to earth, and it also kind of reminded me of what you were doing with your students.
Yeah.
And it, like just right there, you know, the group.
Right.
But anyhow, it is pretty cool to hear these things and think, wow.
You know, the funny thing, since you mentioned the students also is, some of the students have been studying, the guys that were in the class that we just finished up, you know, have been listening and learning stuff from various different recordings, me, blah, 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 you know, over the years. And when the guys will go, well, that's not how the song goes. And I'm going, well, that's how I do it today, but, and then he'll like show me whatever he learned from the stuff. I
Right.
go, well, that's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, that's how we do it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, and again, honestly, sometimes it's better, and sometimes a more stripped down version is better. Now, a song like True Religion, you know, that's one of the first songs that I learned from Ian. I think West Coast Blues was the very first, but True Religion. So it's a you know, guitar players will know immediately. You know what I'm talking about. It's a first position song. Nothing's above the third fret, you know. But it's all right-handed stuff, you know, and it's all this simple. It's like G, G7, C, et cetera, and but it's really cool. And when you get, even though it's so quote-unquote simple, it's kind of hard to explain because it is so simple. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, you know what I mean.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes, like you say, going back to the ground zero and
right.
And yeah, get that. Keep on Truckin', again, another one that follows after the True Religion. And also interesting, as well as these being a big part of your canon of material, that you and Jack have, these songs have become big in hot tuna world as well.
Sure. Like if you look at or listen to, I guess is a better word to use here, that first Hot Tuna record, the Live at New Orleans House.
Right.
In the original version, I should have dedicated it to Ian Buchanan, because except for New Song for the Morning that I wrote and Man's Fate, every one of those songs was the first songs that Ian taught me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that first Hot Tuna album still to this day, and there's something from 69 or 70, whatever.
Yeah.
And all those songs are still really in your guys' set today and sound as fresh as ever.
So one of the things also, but before we move on here, is if you think about that record, you know, Jack and I were already touring with the airplane, and the airplane was starting to come in for a landing about the time that record came out. But you know, we spent before we were making money, so everybody could have their own hotel room. We shared rooms, and so we spent years playing those songs together under various circumstances, maybe going to open mics, or hoots as we used to call them back in those days, or just sitting around the hotel room, stuff like that. we will never be, no matter what happens, probably never be that well rehearsed to do a record. I mean, that's a live record. Now, we did record it for a number of days and pick the best takes, but we were hot back then, and the performances are good because we'd spent so much time doing that stuff together.
Yeah. Well, I'd say you're hot still, Jorma.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that, John.
I understand that first record because you guys have this stuff. You're just ready to put it out.
Right.
You've been playing it for so long, and they bring it out there. Well, that's great that they've standed the test of time. Now, I want to go to song number 5, which is 5'2", eyes of blue.
Would she, could she, could she, could.
Jorma, I'll go way back, but when we first became friends, I used to sometimes ask you to, mess around with that and Freight Train, just playing like the instrumental thing, because they're so cool. But why, Jorma, this song? And I know the song had lyrics because it seems I remember my parents singing it, but your instrumental take on it, and then I wondered also, and I know there's another instrumental on the Reno Road, but you seem to also have a penchant for a good instrumental song.
You know, I mean, I think the really simple answer, and it is a really simple answer, is I just learned it. You know, I mean, keep in mind, I'm really a newbie here.
Okay.
And that circle of, I mean, it's that circle of fifths kind of stuff. You know, if we were playing in C, it would be C, A, D, G. And if it was G, you know, the whole deal like that. It was just plain fun to play. And I didn't know that many songs.
Okay. Was there many acoustic blues instrumentals? Was that, I mean, I know the Rev did like Buck Dance and things like that, but instrumentals, was that, blues was mostly a singing thing?
So,
what do you think?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I think that the generation of us that fixated on players like Reverend Davis, who was a very sophisticated player in a lot of ways, you know. No, let's not qualify it. Was a very sophisticated player. And he was a guy that you know, for the most part, as a street preacher, would be playing gospel songs where he was actually preaching. Like a lot of his recorded songs of gospel material are very long. You know, it's kind of funny to think, well, you know, Reverend, that's too long for radio play. You know,
right?
I mean, he was just doing whatever his thing was. You know, he did it until he'd gotten the message across, and then the song was over. You know, but he was such a monstrous player that he also obviously knew a bunch of instrumentals too. And I do not know, I'm not an authority in this matter, but I suspect that the people that were responsible for getting him to record and stuff like that probably encouraged him to let it all hang out.
Shows up the prowess of his guitar played at the same time. Don't You Leave Me Here. Again, on this record, 1960, and still one of your crowd pleasers to this day.
Indeed.
And,
that's a
Jelly Roll Morton
song. Right. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I learned 2 Jelly Roll songs from Ian, both of which are still in my repertoire today. The other one is Whining Boy Blues.
Right.
And the guys and I in the session we just finished went down the YouTube rabbit hole for one of the original Recani Borsars, and it is the dirtiest song I've ever heard, and I've heard a lot of them.
Well, I know your versions tended to be from subliminally suggestive to downright filthy.
Well, it's a suggestive song, but this is beyond downright filthy, and this is a family-rated podcast here. So, but you know, you need guys, gals. What's Jorma talking about? Just to Google up a Jelly Roll's version of Whining Boy Blues and hang on to your hats.
You'll see. Yeah. Another Man Done Gone. Well, you know, it was so cool when I heard your record because, again, like for me, it's like, wow, he was doing this way back then.
Yeah.
And you know, that Another Man Done Gone, a lot of the blues guys have done versions of that.
Right.
Heck, all kinds of people. Johnny Cash with the Carter family had a version, and Irma Thomas. And
I don't know. You know, it probably would be uncool for me to grab my phone and look this up because we're just.
What do you need to know who wrote it?
Well, you know, I mean, I was going to find out. Maybe see if did somebody write this or.
Yes, it was written by Vera Hall, 1940.
Ooh.
But it does fall under the traditional.
Yeah,
world, it
definitely.
seems, you know. Odetta did a nice version.
Yeah,
Pete
I'll bet.
Seeger. It seemed like a song that a lot of people.
Yeah, especially in that time.
In that time.
In that time, yeah.
Now, two of the songs Jorma, that I want to get to next is the Talkin' Blues and Blues in E.
Right.
The two songs that I'd never ever heard you messing around with before. So
Yeah.
they were real, like, wow.
Yeah, the sources are lost in antiquity. I suspect I was just fooling around and Jack taped it.
Well, the Blues in E is credited to Jorma Kaukonen, so I was going to ask you,
Well,
is that like one of your first blues songs?
I was just playing.
Really?
Yeah, I was just messing around. And
that one.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. I was just playing and Jack taped it, so now it's a song. And that's well, Jorma wrote this song. I guess Jorma did.
I'd keep it, Jorma. I'd keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my next thing I was going to talk about was that West Coast Blues, of course, 1936, Blind Blake song.
Sure.
That's another one of those songs like that, Trouble in Mind.
Right.
I do notice it back in the early days of the ranch and stuff, and maybe you still did it in your teaching. A lot of times you use that for an introduction piece.
Sure. So it's, I look at it as an archetype in some ways. Now, if you listen to Blind Blake was another one of these really sophisticated guitar player. And if you're thinking about the Piedmont style players, in my opinion, the triumvirate would have been Reverend Davis, Blind Blake, and Blind Boy Fuller. I'm sure there's others too, because the more we find out, it's like, wow, how did I miss this guy?
Yeah.
But anyhow, those were the kind of guys that we knew.
Yeah.
So the West Coast Blues thing, that was one of the very first songs that I learned. And it's a great song to teach to somebody that is trying to learn because you can do a credible version of the song without a lot of left hand gymnastics. You can just use the chords C, E, A, D, D7, G, the circle of fifths thing again. And the onus is upon one to just keep that thumb playing those quarter notes, and so it's a great song to practice because it's fun to play. It actually sounds like a song. See, I'm not a guy that ever did exercises or scales or stuff like that.
Yes,
I
I
learned
could see
everything.
that would be a good song for like a warm-up exercise.
Totally,
thing. Yep.
totally.
Yep. Now, Jorma, let's talk about the Quarantine Blues, because I found that real interesting. That Snooks Eaglin, but it's credited as Quarantine Blues on here, but it's what we became to know as Uncle Sam Blues.
Oh.
Is there,
What did he call it again?
Well, on the record on the box it's called Quarantine Blues.
Quarantine?
Or wait, I'm sorry, Questionnaire Blues. Yeah.
And they both
Quarantine,
begin with a qua sound.
That's what it was.
Now, you had me going there for a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, Questionnaire Blues, Snooks Eaglin. Yeah. So there's I forget whether it's a Folkways album or not, but yeah, Snooks. There's that Snooks Eaglin. I think it might be Snooks Eaglin, New Orleans Street Singer. I think that's the name of the record.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not an authority about this kind of stuff, but Snooks was a really sophisticated guy. Some of his stuff was like way over my head. But, there's growing up in an era when we all had draft cards and when, I had a student deferment for a while, but then you're 1A, et cetera, et cetera. So a song like that had relevance to me in my life.
Right.
That that it wouldn't have today.
Did you? Where did it become Uncle Sam Blues?
That's a really good question.
Blues.
And one of the funny things about this too is when I was learning for Ian, I wasn't one of these guys that needed to source my material. For example, when Jack and I recorded Hesitation Blues on the New Orleans House thing, this is going to sound really weird, but it's true. I didn't even know that it was credited to Reverend Davis.
Okay.
Because I didn't care who wrote the songs. I just
Okay.
wanted to learn the songs. And once we became professional musicians, and you have to credit people, because I've always tried to credit the writers of the songs.
Right.
Wow. Now of course I realize it's an archetypal Reverend Davis song, but at the time it was just another cool song.
Well, since we're talking the Rev, let's talk about the Rev here, and
Sure.
if I could play you just a little bit here.
Let's have a listen.
I mean, is that too loud?
No, it's a little loud. I don't hear as good as I used to.
I hate to cut it short, but you know our podcast is limited.
Yeah, I understand.
Keep this back down, but as you listen to that,
Yeah.
and I'm sure everybody out there in Radio Dream Stream podcast land would agree. You listen to that, and instantly you say, "That's Jorma. That's Jorma." And,
Yeah.
The sound of Reverend Gary Davis. Now, Jorma, he must have been a gigantic influence on you.
Yeah, sure.
Ian bringing it to you.
Of course.
6 Reverend songs on this 2-record set. We
Right.
have Death Don't Have No Mercy. We have Candyman, Hesitation, Great Change, Keep Your Lamps Trimmed and Burning, and I Belong to the Band.
Yeah.
And as I looked through that, I thought, wow, there's a couple Blind Blake, couple Blind Boy Full.
Right.
But the Rev was the guy.
Right, and so, again, at the time this was, the Jack taped all this stuff, they were the only songs I knew, and, for a guy that's just starting out, his world as being like a fingerstyle guitar player, a bunch of cool songs to start out with. Now, a song like Death Don't Have No Mercy, still one of my favorite songs today. It's just an outstanding composition.
Yeah.
On many levels, the chord changes, the lyrics incredibly powerful, of course, and the older we get, undeniable.
Yeah.
And I think about something else too, is that I remember one of these funny stories I've told a million times about when I was one of my first songs, Worried Man Blues, takes a worried man.
I love this
Sing
story.
a worried song, worried now, but it won't be worried, et cetera, et cetera. And my dad, that was sort of dismissive of everything that we did that wasn't like classically oriented or like an old jazz piece. What do you know about being worried? Being a teenager, I wanted to say, I'm a teenager, Dad. I know a lot about it, but I was smart enough to keep my mouth shut.
That's what you did.
But that whole, I think. By the time I was learning Death Don't Have No Mercy, I think I'd only known 1 or 2 people who actually died at that time. But there's just something about that it just says
Powerful
it all.
Song.
It just says
Powerful
it all,
song,
yeah.
Still is. Jorma, God, the time goes by so fast.
It does.
And I had hoped to talk to you about all these things here, but I think if it's okay with the producers, we may have to ask for a part 2.
Yeah, we might have to
Because
do a
this
part
Reno
2.
Road, man, I want to find out about Jack's house, what color it was. Were you down in the basement, or did he have a recording?
Oh, we'll talk
room?
about that.
Okay.
Because we'll talk about the rec room. We'll go into detail
We're
about
going to go
this
to
later.
Jack's rec room on part 2?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in today. And Roads and Roads.
And
hope to see you next time. Don't miss out. Let's hear a little more on our way out here.
Walking down that lonesome road set my soul on fire.